Hello, I'm back once again, and now that Godzilla's over and done with, it's time to get back into book reviews. It's been about a month since my last one, and it was The Trench by Steve Alten, the sequel to Meg, a novel of deep terror, and finally I get round to this, Meg Primal Waters. Let's get the glare off it. As always, the review is up on my blog if you want to give it a read or just watch this, which is basically the same thing except it's just me talking. Anyway, without further ado, let's sink our teeth in. Meg Primal Waters. Released in 2004, Meg Primal Waters is the fourth entry in Steve Alten's Meg series. Meg Primal Waters takes place 18 years after the events of The Trench, where we find our protagonist, Jonas Taylor, now nearly 64 years old, and struggling with providing for himself, his wife Terry, and their extended family. The book's prologue starts 18,000 years ago during the late Pliocene, where the book explains about the environmental changes that took place since the last ice age, and the continental shifts which would eventually form our modern world. All the changes in the climate in turn start to affect the migratory routes of all manner of animal species. The book then goes to focus on a juvenile whale shark in the Pacific Ocean, while completely unaware it's being stalked by a 57-foot female megalodon who is nearly to term with its pregnancy. The female megalodon goes to ready herself to attack the whale shark, when directly underneath another Meg appears from the depths, forcing the female to break off, while the male megalodon proceeds to attack and eviscerate its freshly killed prey. The female hangs around until nightfall, but eventually leaves to search for more food to feed herself and her undernourished unborn young, and only finding prey no bigger than a tortoise over the course of 3 days, and the famished Meg then arrives at an island atoll. In the present day, in Tampa Bay, Florida, here we find our protagonist Jonas Taylor, writing his memoirs recollecting the events of how he killed the Meg that risen from the Mariana Trench nearly 22 years ago, by his wife's Terry's insistence, since he quit working for the Tanaka Institute and the once never-ending flow of requests for him to talk at various venues has dried up. Jonas's concentration is broken when a bill collector from American Express calls and inquires about a mailed check, which results in Jonas putting down the receiver after telling the collector to check back the following week, and then returning to write when his concentration is broke again. This time it's by gangster rap music playing from upstairs. Jonas then heads up to his daughter's room, and after banging on the door repeatedly, an angry 17-year-old Danielle Taylor answers the door, and the encounter between them ends bitterly, and Jonas then goes off and checks with his 14-year-old son, David Taylor, who is more interested in playing a game that's based off his father's encounters with the Megs, but he always plays as Angel because it's more fun than a mini-sub. Terry then arrives home from shopping, and Jonas helps to bring the shopping in. In doing so, he sees the damage to Danny's car, and discovers a bag of marijuana hidden under the seat, which adds to his already painful migraine. Meanwhile, at the Tanaka Institute in Monterey, a very elderly Masao Tanaka, who is now 82 years old, looks out at the lagoon, which was once going to be his realized lifelong dream. But in pursuing it, he had depleted his family's fortune and mortgaged his children's futures, which the funds ran out. When the funds ran out, he accepted a contract with Jamstack in exchange for 25 UNIS drones to be deployed along the Mariana Trench to act as an early warning system for earthquakes. However, with a large number of drones suddenly ceasing transmissions and the threat of losing the partnership with Jamstek, Masao is forced to enlist Jonas's help in retrieving one of the unit's drones to assess the damage and find out what caused it. This leads to the attack on his son DJ's sub by the Megalodon, and ultimately trapping it in the steel cable attached to the sub itself, where it's attacked and killed by a larger female Megalodon that's pregnant, which leaves the Mariana Trench to wreak havoc across the ocean, which also gives birth to 3 pups, only one of which survive, and is captured by Jonas after he kills its mother, and this is placed in the Whale Lagoon for daily shows. However, a series of court cases from the kin of the Megalodon's victims severely cripple and affect the Tanaka Institute, which forces Masao to sell it to the energy mogul Benedict Singer, and with his death on the Benthos, the Tanaka Institute's ownership is returned to Masao. 3 years after Angel's escape, the lagoon doors were opened again, and the facility itself was put towards its original purpose, which was to be a protective cove for whales to enter and give birth. However, whales refuse to enter because they're spooked by Angel's lingering presence. Masao takes a loan off Jonas for draining and scrubbing the tank in an effort to remove Angel's scent, to no avail. Now deep in debt and options are becoming more and more scarce, Masao agreed to lease the facility to SeaWorld to house 6 of their orca whales. However, despite the whales being born and bred in captivity, the second the whales were placed inside the waters of the lagoon, they panic, and eventually, with nowhere to beach themselves, they bash their head against the doors, desperately to get out. 2 of them died as a result of this, and the contract with SeaWorld ended with that incident. Now Masao is desperate to sell off the facility, which is becoming harder with everything that's happened, and the costs to maintain it has wiped out his pension, as well as the savings from several potential buyers, following the collapse of the stock market. This also leads to Masao getting a loan off the Drysdale brothers, which also want to buy the land to turn the beachfront and the Tanaka Lagoon into what they say $1 million condos and a high-end shopping marina. Masao refuses on the basis their offer is too low and the fact he doesn't trust the brothers. Meanwhile, Jonas and his family attend the Venice Beach Shark Tooth Festival, where Jonas is to give a talk, which is one of the main events. Once Jonas begins his talk, Danny leaves for a walk around, eventually coming across a stand where contestants for a TV show called Daredevils is placed, where she meets and talks with Fergie, a member of one of the teams taking part in the new season, where they're interrupted by Jenny, another member of the same team, who gives Danny a bit of attitude concerning a plane jump which Fergie is to take part in to promote the show, and after some goading from Jenny, Danny agrees to also participate. Back on the ground, after selling some leftover signed pictures of Angel when she was in the lagoon, Jonas is approached by the producers of Daredevils, Eric Hollander, who asks Jonas to come onto the show as a guest co-host to add a color commentary. And after a lengthy talk with his wife Terry, and with much needed income, Jonas is offered $150,000 for the job. Plus the lure of recapturing some degree of his lost youth is too much for him to pass up, and he accepts, but under a condition set by Terry that their daughter Danny goes with him. But little do any of them know that Angel, after 18 years, has returned from the Mariana Trench and is now in open waters once again. So, like its predecessors, Primal Waters throws us back in the adventures of Jonas Taylor, his family and the ever-present Angel, the Megalodon we're introduced to back in the previous book, The Trench. Also back in Primal Waters is the detail of the Meg's sensory perception, and the attack sequences still add the same level of depth they always have. Now, Steve Alten has definitely upped the ante in this one by having 3 Megs instead of just Angel, which means there's a higher body count. However, the book has more flaws than previous entries in the series, and they go something like this. First of all, there's the story direction. While the 2 previous books are written in the past tense, Primal Waters is written in the present tense, and personally at times I find that the story didn't flow like the previous books did. On another aspect is the reality TV plotline, which, while being a change from the usual shark escapes and goes on a killing spree story, which is great, but ultimately it's kind of stale and kind of boring. The inclusion of reality TV in the plot is a bit weak and somewhat cliche in this day and age where such entertainment has a large influence in network programming. Okay, another flaw is weak characters. Now, in Primal Waters, we do get a larger cast than we have done in previous books, but the majority of them makes us as readers not want to care about them. I'm going to start with Jonas and Terry, since they are the protagonists. Now, I'm going to start by saying, naturally, it would be completely normal for Jonas and Terry to have some degree of post-traumatic stress disorder, especially Terry after what they went through in the trench. However, their portrayal in Primal Waters is somewhat of a caricature, because despite the fact that they are both intelligent people, as it's well established in the previous books, they seem to know nothing about raising their own kids. Now, while Jonas at times is overly strict, while at other times he's either lazy or half-hearted, Terry is overprotective and she doesn't like taking any degree of risks, which is a complete 180 twist on the character we're presented with in the trench, which personally blindsided me. Okay, moving on to the kids, David and Danielle Taylor. First off, they're a stereotypical take on teenagers who don't really care what their parents have to say. While David is the lesser of two evils because he gets a lot of decent development throughout the book, Danny Taylor, on the other hand, is an overdone cliche of a sulky teenager. She's self-absorbed, foolish, devoid of any respect for her father, or anyone else for that matter. She has the morals of an alley cat, and she has an IQ that can be easily compared with the entire cast of Geordie Shore put together. For example, her reaction to getting caught naked with Fergie by her father is to show no degree of shame but rather disgust, and then she berates him for interrupting her. This makes it very difficult to care for Danny in any respect, even when she's in the path of a hungry Meg. Next up is the entire cast of daredevils. Now, the majority of them have similar personalities and moral codes, so they're pretty much all interchangeable and unmemorable. So overall, they don't really add nothing to the story other than raising the body count. Lastly, we come to the antagonist of the story, Michael Maron, who is a minor antagonist in the trench, and he was working for Celeste Singer. While in the trench, he seemed to be a bit more fleshed out as a character, despite his limited number of appearances. In Primal Waters, he just seems to be a one-dimensional character now, with the most basic of intentions, which is to get revenge on Jonas, mostly because of his jealousy, and partly because of Celeste's death. But he also wants to get revenge on Mac, because Mac basically winded him, tied him up, and then proceeded to dump him 40 miles from a town in western Alaska. Because of this, in Primal Waters, he's lost most of his toes on his feet as a result of frostbite. The reason why Mac does this is because at some point in the trench, he tries to kill Jonas. Indirectly, of course. To be honest, I found it really difficult to care about this guy, like I said, because he is one-dimensional, but the fact he tries to be a good guy, he tries to make himself look good. Basically, later on, he tries to pull off a sort of hearts and minds stunt, while he's on camera in a helicopter where he appears to try and want to save some of the daredevils from a megalodon, when in reality the Meg is being somewhat controlled by Maron to kill Jonas with a drone off camera, which he also tries to portray Jonas as mentally insane. Basically, what I'm saying is, the one thing that I miss is the kind of dark complexity that Benedict Singer and Celeste Singer had. Personally, I would have thought that it would have been great if Michael Moran had this kind of complexity within him, you know, flesh out his character. Now, on to my last flaw. It's the time skip. The whole 18 years aspect of Primal Waters doesn't seem to work out well. For starters, David, the son, is still listening to a Walkman, TV shows are still shooting in film, and Jonas, who's supposed to be in his 60s, doesn't really act his age. All things considered, despite these flaws, Meg Primal Waters is still an entertaining read, and it moves at a much brisker pace, and it goes across three different locales, with Jonas and Danny with their story with the Daredevils, David Taylor and the newly reformed James McCready's, who has since become an alcoholic and has a strained relationship with Jonas. Those two go off looking for Angel, while Terry's investigating attacks on whales on the eastern coast, which keeps the book as a whole very interesting. Fans of the Deep, however, are going to be disappointed because most of the action is near the surface this time. Personally, I like the idea of change in terms of scenery because it would basically be a retread of the Trench if it was done any other way. Of course, the book has all the same elements as the last book, but it has a story that stands well, all things considered. On top of all the changes, like I said earlier, are two more Megs that are included in the story. Of course, we have Angel, back from the Trench, and the two new Megs are male. One of them is from one of Angel's first litters. Now, this first new Meg is called Scarface, obviously because he has a facial scar, because he had a fight with another Meg over territory, and he's every bit as vicious as Angel herself. The other unnamed Meg is a bit more wary, but still dangerous. We also get a hint from Michael Moran that there's something even bigger than the Megs lurking in the Trench, so hinty hint for the next one in the series. Overall, I think it's a great continuation on the Meg series. I honestly enjoyed Primal Waters, and it does have a few good twists and turns. Personally, I think Mr. Alten does an excellent job of putting you squarely in the action, and basically it makes you feel like you were actually there. Or at least that's my experience. Okay, Meg Primal Waters is available in paperback and hardback. As far as I'm aware, at the moment, there is no audiobook edition, which is a shame. There is no ebook version on the iTunes store, unfortunately, so I had to get that from another source. Anyway, that's the review for Meg Primal Waters. Next time I will be doing the last in the books that's currently out, Meg Hell's Aquarium, and then after that it's on to the granddaddy of all shark stories, Peter Benchley's Jaws. Alright, thank you very much for watching. If you liked this video, please leave a like or subscribe. You know, all that helps. Once again, thank you very much for watching. See ya!
Audio Jungle.